This is Far From Home. I'm Scott Gurin. Not long ago, it seemed like new cases of the coronavirus had started to plateau here in much of the US, and we'd finally turned a corner with this pandemic. But now that we're in the midst of the holiday season, infection rates are starting to rise once again, and some experts say that a fifth wave could be on the way. Meanwhile, much of Europe, where things largely seemed to be under control, is facing renewed challenges of its own. And on top of all of this, there's now this new and potentially scary Omicron variant, which is beginning to spread around the world. Over the past year and a half on this podcast, I've been checking in with friends and colleagues in far-flung places, asking them to send me recordings from their cell phones describing what the situation is like where they live. So far, we've heard from over a dozen people on every continent except Antarctica, and on today's episode, we'll hear from a few more. Kicking things off this time is Chanita, who checked in from Chiang Mai in northern Thailand. Like many people, she said that as this pandemic has gone through various phases, she sometimes felt what seemed like a false sense of security.
It seems like everything getting back to normal because most of Thai citizens got vaccinated. However, the number of the COVID case is still pretty high, approximately 6,000 to 7,000 persons per day. It seems like people haven't taken the situation that seriously right now. The Thai government has already reopened the country, even though I'm not so sure that we are ready for this.
My name is Saneli Barashko, and I'm recording this from Kyiv, Ukraine, currently in the middle of a third wave of COVID. Now, this wave is the heavy one, it's the strong one. Honestly, I have no idea how we managed to skip past the first two. I mean, it was a mystery for all of us here because as we saw what was unfolding in the US or Italy or even next door in Russia, a lot of people here were terrified and expecting the same, and it never happened. So that gave ground to a lot of speculations about the nature of this miracle. What are Ukrainians doing right? But now I believe Ukraine made it into the top 10 ranking of the deaths per capita from new cases of COVID.
My name is Maria Martin and I live in Antigua, Guatemala. I've been here for many years. I wasn't here during the first part of COVID because I couldn't get back into the country due to the fact that I had been away and then the borders closed. It was a really hard time for most people in Guatemala, where there's a 60% poverty rate. A lot of people make their money in the informal sector. That is, they go out and they sell food or they have a little stand and sell handicrafts. I have a connection to an indigenous community that makes most of its living through agriculture and mostly through tourism. Of course, tourism just died in this country with COVID. It's slowly coming back now, but people are still suffering.
I'm Christine. I'm living in Belgium, Zottegem. It's a small town on the countryside. And we have a high vaccination rate in Belgium, especially in the Flemish part. 80% of the people are vaccinated. But today there is in fact a fourth wave coming on. All shops are starting to cut down. Bigger events, Christmas markets and so on are cancelled. We feel it's coming very close and we are very careful and really limiting unnecessary contacts.
My name's Olli. And I'm recording this in Helsinki, Finland, and we're on the cusp of the fourth wave of COVID-19 here in Finland. It's a weird time. I mean, the first year was all fear and loathing. The winter was especially bad, not as much because of COVID, but just it gets dark and everybody's working remote and there's lockdown and stuff like that. So that was the end of 2020, the beginning of 21, this summer 21, There was no lockdown in Helsinki. Things were looking good. Things felt good. My parents could see their grandkids. So we've been sort of holding off on that for security reasons for a while. It felt like things were under control. I guess it still feels like that. Or more specifically, I think that right now I'm in the kind of headspace where I can look at the infection numbers, the breakthrough cases, the hospitalizations, and I see that COVID hasn't gone away. The numbers are going up, but I sort of don't want to acknowledge that. And it's not because I'm a vaccine skeptic or a COVID skeptic. It's just like, it's too much this time around.
People have gotten a lot more tense. The government started imposing some real restrictions for the unvaccinated. We weren't allowed to board a train anymore between different regions or an interregional bus. Unfortunately, we do have a strong anti-vaccination sentiment. I remember reading the polls from like a year ago, and I believe the figure was about like 50-50, with half of the population heavily against the vaccine. We are approaching about 30% of adults vaccinated, which puts us in the rear of the Europe rankings, unfortunately. Hopefully things are still gonna move ahead, but obviously still too slow.
My name is Cát Tiên. I'm living in Hoi An, Vietnam. I'm recording this while I'm staying at my house, having coffee, enjoying my little morning moment. COVID is still a difficult problem to solve for Vietnam. Although the number of infected people is gradually decreasing, no one really knows for sure what will happen next. But the good news is that my country is speeding up vaccination, and I got my first Pfizer shot in Hoi An. The situation in Hoi An is quite good compared to other big cities like Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh. I feel lucky that the authorities here have worked extremely hard to keep this place safe.
When the vaccine became available in places like Europe and the United States, it took a very long time for Guatemala to start its vaccine rollout. It was one of the slowest in the Americas. It was so slow that people who had money, that's a very small percentage of the population, they were leaving to go to Mexico or to the United States, to Miami or Texas to get their vaccine. So the rollout was really slow, it was really inefficient, and it especially hit indigenous communities because these communities that have been marginalized for a very, very long time, not only were not getting the vaccine, but were not getting health information in their language. And the government refused to use community radios as a way to get information out. So now you have a situation where Guatemala's rural and indigenous communities are hit the hardest in this latest wave of the pandemic, and where many people are skeptical of the use of the vaccine.
Since we have corruption, we obviously have fake certificates. And aside from just completely rubbish fake QR codes, we also had doctors pretending that they injected the vaccine into your arm while just giving you the papers, and that's it. So what the health ministry did is they opened up anonymous vaccination centers for people who had fake vaccination papers. It basically gives you vaccination amnesty in case you bought a fake certificate beforehand, then realized that, oh my God, what did I do? The situation is horrible. A lot of people around me are dying, but I already have my health records saying that I got vaccinated. So now you have these anonymous centers where you can still do it, even despite your previous fraud.
I mean, there's been talk of enforcing harder lockdowns. Something has to change. The numbers have to come down somehow. I know a few people who've gotten it. Luckily, no one in my immediate family. Most of the people I've heard of have gotten over it pretty good. So maybe that's why I don't have the fear in me, even though I realize I'm not in my 20s anymore. But it's just I really don't want to deal with it anymore.
If we're talking about something that's very specific to Ukraine right now, as you may know, one of our regions is uncontrolled by the government. It's the Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast of Ukraine, which was attacked by the Russian forces in 2014. and it's currently a de facto separate entity. My best guess is that these are just Russian special services and agents controlling the region. So from what I know from the people who have friends still there in those territories, who have relatives, COVID ravaged there horribly because, first of all, for political and military reasons, these two regions are now closely tied to Russia in all senses. And Delta has been ravaging Russia since early summer. Add on top of that the healthcare system there in Donetsk and Lugansk is also crippled because it's not a country, it's not an entity, it's an uncontrolled territory during this war, during this conflict. So from what I've heard, the situation there is pretty horrible. And sadly, there's no way to help those people aside from the fact that Ukraine allows residents of those oblasts to cross the border and get vaccinated with our stock of vaccines here in Ukrainian-controlled, in government-controlled soil.
I reported on my friend, the Maya priestess, Dolores Razan Pablo, who used to make a fairly good living as a trilingual tour guide and now has been kind of forced to take whatever job that she can. Basically, it's getting up at 4 a.m. to make tortillas and sell these tortillas, getting paid maybe 20 quetzales, like $3. Before, she would make up to maybe $100 a day doing tours for the tourists who would come to Santiago. She did a ceremony to ask the gods and goddesses to help her village, which, like many indigenous communities in Guatemala, are suffering from COVID more than the rest of the population.
The first corona wave brought us closer as a family. We lived together, we had a business, and we had to close for more than 3 months. But for us it was like a time to cook, to garden, and to enjoy, to do things together. It was a really nice period, March, April, June. We had very beautiful weather. And for us it was like a 3 months holiday. But now really they don't want to get back to that situation. I know from friends that even young people, also elderly and single persons, the first corona was really a catastrophe. They were so lonely and they felt so isolated because social contacts are so important. We need to work, we need to have contacts, and I really hope that the current restrictions of wearing masks will help us to get through to it, and that we evolve in a situation where we can live next to COVID and without too many limitations for everyone.
To be honest, I'm really surprised that I still haven't gotten COVID myself. Even though I'm vaccinated, I already have a lot of friends who had breakthrough cases. My brother, who is a lawyer, he's working with people who are mostly over 40, and the last figure he gave me was 9 people from his business contacts already passed on because of COVID. Judging by the IT company that I was working with, most big businesses ignored most of the restrictions. They hated the idea of having people work from home. They tried to return them to office at the first opportunity. So the situation isn't good. Most people aren't taking the precautions seriously. I still do believe that the first 2 waves and how smoothly they went for Ukraine damaged the perception of how seriously you need to take this. So now we are in a bit of a mess.
I often think that people in the States don't realize how lucky we are, where we can just go into our neighborhood drugstore and get a vaccine, and it's fairly easy and it's reliable, and you know what you're getting, and thus that gives us an obligation to the rest of the world and places like Guatemala?
I have all my family close around, my brother, my sister, my parents, and so far nobody has been affected really severely. In fact, my daughter had corona even after 2 vaccines, but with a quarantine of 10 days, she's okay again. I feel very lucky. I feel myself privileged that I live on the countryside, far away from all the hectic places.
For me personally, I am lucky enough that I can stay inside most of the time. I miss going out on field trips. I did go out in the last few weeks to report on COVID in indigenous communities and, was double masked and had a long boom mic to do my interviews. I thought that people needed to know what the situation there was. But otherwise, in many ways, I've curtailed my field reporting, and I miss that. I miss that a lot.
I really miss traveling abroad. If I have a chance to go somewhere next year, I will book ticket and go there as soon as possible. I hope everything will get back to normal very soon.
My daily life is affected a lot, of course. So many things change. Now I have way too much free time. Usually I will spend it with friends in bars or cafes. Not many places are open. Hoi An has started welcoming domestic tourists for a few days, which I think is a good start. And also means that I can get my job back as a singer in a band. What I miss the most is probably my job. If the epidemic hadn't happened, we would have gone a lot further and achieved more success. But I will not lose my hope. Just like everyone here, we are all waiting for a better future and we are ready to rebuild a new life.
Right now, I want to get a time machine, jump into the summer of 2022. If COVID isn't over by then, at least I feel like there has to be a new normal. Because there are only so many days that you can just hang on and hold on and have everything feel like it's in stasis, like nothing's happening. It has to get better at some point, right? It has to.
Thanks so much to Ollie in Finland, Chanita in Thailand, Savali in Ukraine, Maria in Guatemala, Christine in Belgium, and Tien in Vietnam for sharing their stories. Thanks also to Kevin MacLeod, who supplied some of the music I used in this episode. If you're new to the show and you enjoyed listening, you might also like the 3 previous episodes I've done as part of the COVID Stories series. If you want to check them out, I've linked to them in the show notes. Remember, you can follow this program on Instagram or Facebook by searching for Far From Home Podcast, or follow me on Twitter, where I'm at Scott Gurian. And as always, you could visit my website at farfromhomepodcast.org, where there's tons of bonus content from my archives. You could also email me to send feedback on the show. I'd love to hear what you think of this series. Do you enjoy it, or are you tired of it and you think I should move on to something else? You could let me know by emailing me at info@farfromhomepodcast.org. Until next time, thanks for listening. One last note before I go. If you like Far From Home, you might also enjoy my friend Polly Bo's podcast.
Meet Palle Bo.
Palle, you're Ben?
A full-time traveler and digital nomad from Denmark on an epic journey around the world.
Sextant, North Star. Exactly. Yeah.
At the age of 50, he made a bold decision.
Tell me your name again.
Palle. Yeah.
He sold everything.
Sold everything.
His house, his car, his furniture.
And my wife.
Sold her? To the circus?
Got much more than I expected.
And set out on a quest to visit every country in the world.
Like a very, very used second-hand car.
Documenting everything along the way.
If you like to travel but haven't really been able to do much of it, let me do that for you. I know it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. Join me, and maybe you'll get some inspiration for your next trip. My name is Palle Bo.
The Radio Vagabond Podcast. Gotta keep moving. Gotta keep moving. Gotta keep moving. Gotta keep